and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the
to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And I wasn't around last week, so I do apologize. I hope you listened to the rerun of Ralph Blumenthal. That was a great interview, and that's why I ran it again. So anyway, we will be going strong. Our guest this evening, Rizwan, actually ended up not feeling well. So Bill Birnes, the great old Bill Birnes, we had scheduled with him way ahead, and I asked him if he could jump back and do this show in particular. He said no problem. So here he is tonight. We're going to be introducing him in a little while. Before that, we have Alejandro Rojas coming up with UFO Updates. A lot of people who have asked me how they'd like to support the show, but didn't want to go through PayPal and my website and all that. I do now have a Patreon page, and that's linked up on my website, podcastufo.com. So you can check it out there and get there from that website. Also, we have a new blog, and that is Gray Barker. What is the name of that? Gray Barker, and it's a funny title. Something like UFO... I forget it. But anyway, check out the blog. Prankster, that's it, UFO Prankster. So check that out, if you would, on podcastufo.com. And so I am going to stop mumbling and get the great Alejandro Rojas on the show. Alejandro, welcome to the show.
Hello, here I am, so we can mumble together.
We can, yes. How you doing?
So, not too bad. It's been a crazy month, July, and now we're into early August already. It's been nutso. Super busy. So, of course, Comic-Con and then the MUFON Symposium, all kinds of stuff. In fact, I want to show off this T-shirt. Let's see, for the YouTubers. Check this out. This is a T-shirt I got at MUFON. It's a new Travis Walton one.
Okay, let me just do this. There, I brought you over a single screen. Oh, wow. Hey, that is a great shirt. The Zap.
Pretty cool, huh? So
that's a really good likeness of him.
Travis Walton's work.
Yeah.
Yeah. The artist that does like the book and the posters and stuff like that kind of is traveling around with him lately. The guy's so awesome. His work is great. And so I love this new image he put together. He's got a poster and stuff like that. And he made a T-shirt, which is awesome. You might have noticed I had Travis sign it even. But yeah, so pretty cool. That's what I've been up to. Otherwise, a lot of stories out there. I'm very excited about this story that just launched today. So Comic-Con was nearly a month ago, not quite, but we secretly snuck in a couple of special guests at the Den of Geek Comic-Con party on the first night on Thursday, and that was Lou Elizondo and Sean Cahill. So not many people knew they were going to be there. We could have kept it hush-hush, but it was a lot of fun. And I was able to coerce them into getting onto the red carpet and letting me do an interview. As we all know, those of us who seek interviews with some of these guys, especially Lou, it's hard to do. You and I are like some of the few UFO people who've gotten interviews with him. But we were able to pull it off, and I asked them a couple questions. First of all, I asked them about, now that the season 1 is over of Unidentified, how the reception has been. And here's what Lou said. He said, I think the reception has been a little mixed. I think there's a lot of people who have been very excited to see the information come out and offer that peak of disclosure. But, of course, there are still a lot of people that remain very, very skeptical, and we have to continue to chip away at that with information and data. In fact, this was a video interview I did, which you can see on the front page of Open Minds right now, a link to that, and, of course, in my social media. Cahill had a little bit of a different experience. He says that actually, from his standpoint, that the response has been really overwhelmingly positive. And in fact, he says that he's got a lot of support from friends and family, and he's been hearing from a lot of people, such as military colleagues and such, that are now kind of coming out to tell about their UFO stories because of the show. They feel more comfortable to do that. So that's what's always good about these very credible shows. Another thing I asked about, of course, we had to ask about Area 51. And in fact, the rest of the questions I asked, we took from the guests there at the party. So everybody, it was later in the party, so most people already had a drink or two in them when we asked these questions. But definitely a fun party atmosphere there. But Lou said he was kind of exasperated when I asked the question. You could see him do a major eye roll. And he says, "No, I'm not storming Area 51. In fact, I would advise very much against that." He says, "Look, I think we have only gotten this far because we are working in a collaborative way with our government friends and colleagues. I would not advise trespassing on federal property ever. I think we need to work with them. I think we need to be collegial and collaborative. I think if we only look back to the last year and a half, I think we can see that we have achieved a lot through peaceful means. That is very much ill-advised, in my opinion, of course, going to Area 51. So he definitely does not recommend doing it at all, and he's very against it, which makes sense. And in fact, this is kind of interesting, some late-breaking news today. To the Stars has announced they're working with a company. I can't even remember the name right now. You can look on their social media. But essentially, this company also has government contracts. So they're going to be working with the government on technology. That's about all they've said. So it's very cryptic. We don't know much about that. But what it indicates, of course, is more government collaboration with To the Stars. And so I know many can see some conspiracy behind that, but personally, I think it's a positive step because, these are people interested in these topics that we know. You mentioned, in fact, kind of related is Ralph Bloom wrote the New York Times article that kind of broke the story with Leslie Kean and Helene Cooper. But Ralph is one of those guys who's kind of been one of the mainstream guys on the fringe that have been looking into this topic, just like Chris Mellon and some of these other To the Stars people. So it's just kind of funny because these mainstream people, even like Blumenthal, there's a lot of conspiracies around. You've probably even heard some when you did your Blumenthal interview.
Not
were
really.
People saying, "Why are you?" No, that's good.
But I can guess what they are. Because of a conversation that I had with him, I don't know, several months ago. He just said that there's more to be revealed, and right now I'm not going to be talking to anyone. So I think the reason that he's, silent may be some reason. I mean, that always stirs up controversy. I don't know if that's part of it or not.
Yeah. I think what I was referring to in particular is there are a lot of, there's a lot of buzz out there amongst the more conspiratorial UFO community that the entire New York Times thing was engineered. All of this mainstream media has been engineered. Essentially, people believe anything that's mainstream engineered and, some kind of MJ-12 initiative or something like that. So that's what I was referring to, which gets kind of funny. But, of course, those who have been able to interact and interview some of these guys, they're a bunch of enthusiasts like us that are trying to get information out and trying to investigate and research all of this. And that's why it's pretty exciting. A couple other headlines, if we got time.
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple other things are kind of interesting. So there's a story that just came out of footage of an apparent UFO. But it says, but people can't get over the alien drunk driver. And so this is a kind of funny story. A dish-shaped gray object that was videotaped, and it's floating around in the sky, but it's kind of willy-nilly kind of floating like a drunk, like the UFO driver is drunk or something like that. It's definitely dish-shaped. And for that reason, I think a lot of people will think that it is a UFO or some kind of dish-shaped UFO flying strangely. And I can only imagine what people will be saying, that's probably indicative of the propulsion or something like that. To me, it looks to be obviously a balloon. I think it's a UFO-shaped balloon that's floating up there, and it's moving like it would in the wind, kind of just back and forth, like, haphazardly, as if it was a drunk driver.
Wow.
So, so
I
that's
wonder
kind
if
of an
the
interesting video
FAA
out there.
would arrest them. Yeah.
Shoot them down.
Yeah, well, the FAA just arrested some people overseas, some pilots overseas. I don't know if you caught that.
Oh,
But
yeah, there was that
intoxicated.
pilot who was completely drunk. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it happens every so often. And luckily, I haven't been in a jet, a commercial plane that was flying like that. That would be pretty scary.
That would
But
not be fun.
fortunately, the computers pretty much got control of most of your flight.
That's right.
So that's a funny story. Here's another one related to the Storm Area 51. So some people might have noticed that the Facebook event for Storm Area 51 was actually taken down a couple days ago. But just today, and I found this out from a tweet from Jeremy Corbell, who did the Area 51 documentary, or the Bob Lazar one, that it's been reposted. So you can go find that now. I think it's something, I don't know how many million have signed up for this event at this point, but Belize is offering free trips to residents of the town near Area 51 if they want to flee the town during the event.
Wow.
It's funny because everybody's jumping in on this kind of Area 51 meme, trying to cash in on the popularity of all of it. And this is a pretty novel way for the Belize Tourism Board to get in there by offering free trips. I think if I lived in Rachel, I think this town, I would probably do it. Why not?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
But there's only like 5
if you
people
knew
that
how
live
many
there. So
how many people signed up. Are you?
Oh, how many people signed up? You want me to look it up real quick?
Yeah. Well, might as well. I mean, geez, it's bizarre, and I'm kind of surprised still with the conversations you and I both have had that Facebook is leaving the page up when this is an illegal, an illegal act would be what's being promoted as an illegal act.
Right. I mean, it is, and I think that was the main argument. However, what they've been arguing is that it was a joke, so it wasn't serious, that they were seriously trying to convince people that it was an illegal act. And what Jeremy seems to be indicating is that there were enough people to argue this that they put it back up, and its popularity. It's certainly, for instance, the Belize Tourism Board, a lot of people are not taking it completely seriously. However, I'm sure there are many who are taking it seriously. And I personally, I think I said this before, and I'm still considering actually, going down there just to kind of document what happened. And we know this from George Knapp's reporting that at least some of the local businesses have been, let's see if I can find it, but some of the local businesses have been, have gotten some land where people can come and park, and they've also and camp out there, and they've also hired bands to play music. So
it's going to be like Woodstock. Yeah,
exactly. There's going to be a festival type thing going on there to some degree. So that'll be fun. And I do like that idea. I mean, if this turns into an annual festival at Area 51 where people can kind of celebrate this idea, but also express their interest in, the government revealing more information about these topics, that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. That would be pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you think?
I think the whole premise of the way it started is kind of, kind of takes away from that, but maybe nothing else could have kickstarted an event that, may happen and be repeated. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it.
I think if it does happen, that, you would need quite a bit of security there to make sure that no goofballs actually do try it.
Yeah.
So that they're vigilant in catching these guys. And I think that for the most part, it'll all be pretty nonviolent. Even if, there are a couple people that stray over and get arrested. For the most part, there has not been, violence as far as people who have gone over the line. I've written an article about that, about several people. And essentially what they do is they detain the security guards at Area 51, detain these people, put them face down in the dirt, and you've got to wait for the local cops to come, which can take, anywhere from 45 minutes to a few hours. And then you're taken into town and fined and typically let go. However, there was a gentleman who did cross and, they had to chase him down, and he had a device in his hand, and I think he actually got shot. I'm actually probably going to write an article about this one, but so as far as I know, that's the only one who's been harmed. But someone said here that it's dangerous, and it certainly is a dangerous situation. So I don't know. We're going to see what happens. Otherwise, there are 2 million people currently signed up as going, and then another 1.4 million that are signed up as interested. I am still in the interested side of things. Certainly not contemplating whatsoever storming Area 51, but I am curious, and of course, as someone who covers this stuff, I kind of would like to cover the story and see what happens, and maybe get some pictures and video of what goes down out there.
I wonder if anyone will be on a watch list or some type of list if they say they're going. And, you and I should figure out a way to capitalize on this like everybody else. We're in the UFO biz.
Well, for the UFO Congress, we have been trying to figure that out. But one thing that we are going to have, and we haven't really hit this big because Jeremy's still getting us some more information, but Jeremy does have a big announcement he's going to be making related to this soon, Jeremy Corbell. And he will be updating people on this announcement at the UFO Congress. So Jeremy and I have been talking, and he does want to kind of make this a big deal because they have something planned that they're going to be sharing soon, and he'll be sharing a lot more information at the UFO Congress, and it is related to the September 20th Area 51
so
event.
He is a smart guy. He's figuring out how to capitalize on it. Interesting.
Well, it was his video that really started everything. He did the documentary. He's actually known Joe Rogan for some time and was able to talk Joe Rogan into having him and Bob Lazar on. To my surprise, and I think others, Joe Rogan, who's usually skeptical, has been very excited about Bob Lazar, and he keeps talking about him and posting stuff. And that's what encouraged this young man, Matty Robertson, to post this kind of joke event. And so it was, inspired by Jeremy Corbell's documentary and Joe Rogan interviewing Bob Lazar.
Interesting. Well, this is really great, Alejandro. We've gone over a little bit, so anyway, I'll be seeing you next week, and I can't wait to see you in, about a month, right?
Yeah, just a few weeks. So everybody, you can see that the stories I'm talking about on the front page of openminds.tv. And of course, you can come hang out with Martin and I at the UFO Congress. So check out ufocongress.com. And we're right here. People are listening to us on KGRA. If you use the code KGRA, capital letters KGRA at checkout, you'll get 10% off.
Excellent. All right. All good, Alejandro. I'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye. All right. Our guest was kind enough to be the second guest on this show when I very first started, when not a whole lot of people would take the chance to come on a show that's brand new, and from an unknown person like myself. Bill Birnes did, and I've always appreciated that. He's a great guy. You may know him from the great show UFO Hunters. That's still a lot of episodes up on YouTube. He is highly intelligent, has written a ton of books, and a great guy. And welcome to the show, Bill. Oops. I think we may have lost Bill. All right, hang on, everyone. Let me see if I can get him back. Here we go. Bill, you there?
I'm here.
Hey,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
you are. Did someone hang up on you? I'm sorry about
No.
that.
What happened was I was connected. For some reason, I found myself connected via Alejandro. So when Alejandro clicked off, mine clicked off too. So I had to click
I
back
see.
on.
So we'll blame it on Alejandro for now.
Blame it on him. That's
Yeah.
what I said.
Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I know you've been on a few times over the years. Last time was, and earlier I had announced that it was yourself and Nancy going to be on the show, but it was just you, and that was my mistake when I was emailing Nancy. So anyway, it's good to have you. I always like the both of you. Nancy's wonderful, and but anyway, all good. And Bill, last time you were on the show, we did that in person in Phoenix.
What was it? Alejandro's conference.
That's right. And you write a lot of books. I'm going to say, how many books have you written in total?
About 40, 35
books.
to 40. I'm not sure because I do a lot of co-authoring. So
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So I count them too. But yeah, about 40 books total since 1985.
Yeah, that's totally amazing. And what's your latest book?
Well, what I'm working on now is back about 4 years ago, 2017, maybe 2016, we wrote a book called Dr. Feelgood, which was the true story of this doctor who came to the United States from Germany in the 1930s. He actually fled the Holocaust. It was before the Holocaust actually started, but the Nazi brown shirts told him that he was on a list of people that were going to be picked up and put into concentration camps. So he packed up his bags, packed up his family. They fled that night to Prague, Czechoslovakia. But he was a doctor, and he couldn't practice medicine in Prague. He didn't have a medical license there. So what he did was he fled from there to Paris and became very famous in Paris because he was the doctor he was known as a doctor giving abortions and all kinds of not legal, less than legal medical treatments to people. Among them were the writers Miller, Anais Nin, people like that, Billy Wilder, the great producer and director. Mm-hmm. And he came to the United States in the late 1930s, right before the war broke out in Europe, and he established a medical practice in New York. What he's really known for is that this was the doctor who who synthesized, when he was in Germany in the 1920s, methamphetamine. So he was the original Walter White. And he synthesized methamphetamine, which was then the Nazis took his formula, and that became the drug Preverin that was used to jack up Adolf Hitler during the war. And he was injecting methamphetamine into a whole range of very famous people in New York: Tennessee Williams, Truman Capote, a whole bunch of famous writers, people who followed him from Europe, a lot of European expats, and they were all his patients. One of his patients was Chuck Spaulding, who was senator then, John F. Kennedy's roommate at Harvard. And when Kennedy was running for president and was very sick and hurt his back again, he had a bad back and was suffering from irritable bowel syndrome and Crohn's disease and, of course, Addison's disease, which in 1960 was a fatal disease. It was an adrenal disease and it was fatal. And Chuck Spaulding took Max Jacobson took President Kennedy to Max Jacobson's office, where Kennedy got his first methamphetamine shots. And from that point on, for the next 3 years, he was a complete methamphetamine addict. He was so impressed with the results of the drug, didn't really know that he was on speed. He got Jackie Kennedy addicted. Winston Churchill became addicted to it. And ultimately, it killed Jackie Kennedy. The effects of methamphetamine were so powerful in terms of creating an intense sexuality that John F. Kennedy was having an affair with Marilyn Monroe. He spilled the secrets of Area 51 to Marilyn Monroe. And when the CIA was tapping his phone, that was basically, they realized that Kennedy was out of control. And so we believed that part of the reason that the CIA was behind the Kennedy assassination and the murder of Marilyn Monroe was methamphetamine, and that Kennedy was out of control.
Wow.
And so the book was Dr. Feelgood. Now what we're doing is we are doing the sequel to Dr. Feelgood called the Dr. Feelgood Case Book. And it's all the peripheral events surrounding this doctor, including things like the story of Hedy Lamarr, which is now going to be a television series starring Gal Gadot, the other events, how the story of Marilyn Monroe, and how that one doctor created a whole community of methamphetamine users in the 1960s that resulted in deaths. We believe Max Jacobson ultimately was a serial killer. He murdered his wife, he murdered a CIA agent. But Max Jacobson, when he was in Vienna after he fled Berlin, was turned into an operative by the Soviet NKVD, by the Soviet military intelligence. So here's a doctor treating the President of the United States, who's a Soviet operative, also treating the Kennedy family photographer at the White House, who was a CIA non-official cover officer. So it's a real spy versus spy in the White House on drugs.
Wow, that is going to be quite a book. Well, all right, we are right at break. This is Martin Willis. I'm on with Bill Birnes. Hang on, and we'll be right back.
All right, Martin, we're in the clear. There's 4 minutes, give or take a few here in this break.
4 minutes, got it. All right, Bill, so I think we pretty much wrapped up that right before the break on this book. So during the YouTube break, the 4 minutes, let's just chat. This may come up anyway, but let's just chat about UFO Hunters, where I first got the idea of asking you to be on the show. How did you get on that show because of the magazine originally?
Actually, ultimately, no. They used my name as publisher of the magazine, but I originally got on the show because we had an ebook company. We still do, but this was back in 2003. We had an ebook company called Filament Books, and we had a number of authors that the producers of the old UFO files wanted on the show. So in the conversation setting up the rationale for that UFO files episode, they said, well, why don't you just be on the show? Just, you introduce them. And this was the Soviet conspiracy about UFOs. And so I did. And the funny thing was, I had just had laser eye surgery. I mean, that earlier that week. Mm-hmm. And so we were living in California, living in Marina del Rey, actually living on our boat.
Right.
And,
yeah, I remember. You said that. Yeah.
Right. And so we were on the dock, and they said, oh, it's such a beautiful scene, the sailboats floating back and forth in Santa Monica Bay and the beautiful sunshine. Let's film you on the dock. And I said, well, if you film me on the dock in the bright California sunshine, desert sun, if you film me on the dock, I have to wear sunglasses because the doctor, my eye doctor, said you can't walk around in the sun without sunglasses because you just had surgery. You just had a laser surgery. So I said to them, if I'm going to be in the sun, if I'm in the shade, that's fine. But if I'm going to be in the sun outside, then I'm going to have to wear sunglasses. So what they did was they took a still photo and sent it back to New York to the network, and they said, leave it. We like it. Looks great. That's how that I got to wear the sunglasses on the show.
Right.
And from there, I did a few more of the old UFO files. Then I was on the magazine, and one of our writers was Pat Uskert, who had seen a UFO over Venice Beach. And Pat sent us the video that he took. We said to Pat, my wife, Nancy, who was the editor of the magazine, said to Pat, this is a great idea. Why don't you take a shot of a circular balloon, one of those party silver balloons, launch that, film it, then do a split screen with the balloon against the UFO and let everybody see it and say, okay, fine, you can see the difference between a balloon spinning in the air currents and a UFO moving over the coast. And very popular. Put it up on YouTube, was very popular. So then my wife suggested, why don't you, this would be a great YouTube video. Why don't you find other people who did the same thing you did, who saw a UFO and filmed it, and let's put that on YouTube. So he did. And then I was doing a movie at Hearst Reality Television, called Actuality Television. And I proposed to them, this is a great idea. If you want to do a UFO show, it's fabulous. And they said, we don't think UFOs will sell. We like the idea. You guys it makes sense, but I don't know. I don't think it's going to work. So I went to the producer of UFO Files, and he said, that's great. Let's do a demo reel. So we did a demo reel. Then History Channel said, why don't you do an episode of UFO Files with the people that you think would be great to do this other show? So we did, and that was the show we did called Red Alert USOs. And we went out to Santa Monica Bay with test tubes and all skin diving, scuba diving equipment, and they did some scuba diving off the boat, or were looking for trace elements of a crashed UFO. It was one of the highest rated UFO Files episodes. So UFO Files said, okay, let's do the show. What do you want to call it? And we said, how about UFO Road Trip? And what we didn't know was that History, 5 years earlier, or maybe 8 years earlier, had already trademarked the name UFO Hunters. And they said, no, we'll call it UFO Hunters. And that's how UFO Hunters was born.
Amazing. Wow. I love to hear the backstory on how these things, start. There's always a really good story to it. Well, I just found out that the radio station lost power. KGRA. So we're going to keep going here on YouTube. And let me just see. Yeah, it's just you and I here.
Okay.
Well, that's fine. We'll keep going. So you pretty much wrapped it up. You were talking about Max Jacobson and about your book there. You pretty much wrapped up what that's going to be about. And that's really amazing. When you said in particular about Jackie, is that documented what went on with her?
Oh, absolutely. Really? Yeah. I mean, first of all, we had Max Jacobson's own, he wrote in 1978-ish, maybe. Mm-hmm. He died in 79. He wrote a mini autobiography, and which was really kind of a rant. I mean, he was furious at what happened to him because he felt that he got President Kennedy elected, that he got Jackie Kennedy, he cured her migraines, he cured a whole bunch of symptoms. Of course, long-term extensive methamphetamine use, according to John F. Kennedy Jr., John, he told one of our sources that it was the methamphetamines that caused Jackie's acute lymphoma, and that's why she died.
Wow.
But so, I mean, theoretically, he killed her as well. But, yeah, this is all documented stuff.
Isn't that something? And now, you said that this was his own chemical formula to begin with?
Well, the German scientists were experimenting with methamphetamines before World War II, as far back as the 1920s, as a method to keep pilots awake. Okay, let's even go further back. Drugs have been used as stimulants in warfare ever since the 15th century. I mean, you all know the story of Marco Polo, who discovered that the Mongolians were using hashish as a drug to whip up their assassins. And the word assassin comes, I mean, etymologically, it comes from hashish. It was called hashishin, were the killers. IN is the Arabic, Aramaic, Hebrew ending for a plural. And so the hashashin were contract killers, the first contract killers. And that came into the English language as the word assassin. And so the Mongolians and the Chinese were using it first, all the way back in the late Middle Ages. And in the 18th and 19th century, well, in the 18th century, drugs were used. A drug cat was used in South America, and a version of that was used in Africa during the British colonial wars against the Zulus in the 19th century. So the idea of using drugs to enhance warrior skills and deaden pain, one of the big stories was that how could the British, a British Royal Army contingent was wiped out by the Zulus. And people were saying, how could the Zulus withstand British gunfire? And the reason was that a lot of the warriors were on drugs. And even though they were shot, they could withstand the pain. And the British were amazed. The German scientists in the early 20th century, 1915, well, right after the war, 1918-ish, they began experimenting with drugs to keep soldiers awake on long marches during the trenches, because one of the issues in European trench warfare during the First World War was that soldiers couldn't stay awake for 48 hours at a time. They would go to sleep, and they were sitting ducks for a charge. As a result, what happened was the German scientists developed this drug, basically speed, that would keep soldiers awake and alert. Then, when aerial warfare began, they were using the drug to keep pilots awake. The Americans used the drug to keep pilots awake during World War II. I mean, so everybody was using the drug. It wasn't as though there was like a hidden drug. And so when Max Jacobson synthesized it, it became very popular in Germany and then in Europe. And it became the drug of choice for a lot of European literati who claimed that the drug gave them enhanced creative powers. That was the coterie that Max Jacobson brought to America with him. And the list of people who were his patients and later became drug addicts ranged all the way from Cecil B. DeMille to Winston Churchill to Harry Truman on both sides of the Atlantic. Wow. In fact, the story goes that Cecil B. DeMille, when he was filming The Ten Commandments, had a major heart attack. And his Egyptian doctors, they were filming it obviously outside of Cairo, his Egyptian doctors said that he would have to leave the set to go into a hospital for treatment. And he said, no way I'm doing that. He called his doctor, Max Jacobson, flew him out to Egypt, and Max gave him heavy-duty methamphetamine injections. But it was not just methamphetamine. That's the whole point. Jacobson believed, this was his theory, that diseases like muscular dystrophy and all kinds of blood diseases, leukemia, could be cured by treating the blood. Because when Max Jacobson began his residency in surgery at the Charité Hospital, he realized that patients weren't dying from the operations. It was the joke, gee, the operation was successful, too bad the patient died. The operations worked. Patients were dying from sepsis. And in fact, what most people don't realize is that in the Civil War, most of the deaths were deaths from sepsis. And the other fascinating thing about it was that Abraham Lincoln, for example, Abraham Lincoln didn't die from the gunshot wound. He lived for 24 hours. What he died from was sepsis. And so because sepsis was so prevalent, Max Jacobson believed that if he could avoid surgery, completely, then he would treat the blood. So how did he treat the blood? His theory was that if he could inject into the bloodstream live cells from animals, now remember, these are live cells, okay? Live cells from animals that rejuvenated themselves. So what animals rejuvenate themselves? Eels, right? Cut an eel, it grows a new body. So if there were eel cells, sheep gonads, sperm cells from bulls, he injected all these rejuvenating organisms into the human body. In Germany in the 1920s, there was no Food and Drug Administration. So how did doctors test the effects of their drugs? They self-injected. That's what they did. They self-injected. So as a result, Max Jacobson began injecting himself with this concoction. And he got so sick. So he said, what if I could find a way to mask the initial effects of this animal byproduct? And by the time the effects wear off, I'm cured. So that's when he synthesized methamphetamine. But as a result, he became a meth addict. So he's addicted to his own medications. But, and this is the fascinating thing, in the eel cells, sheep gonads, bull sperm, in all the stuff that he injected were living bacteria and living viruses. What does a virus want? I mean, think about this. It's a life form. What does it want? If it had volition, which it does, by the way, what would a virus want? Same thing you do, right? Good place to live without a leaky roof, enough food to eat, a way to mate, and the ability to move to a new place when it got overcrowded, right? That's what we do. So sure enough, that collective of viruses began inspiring Max Jacobson to inject more and more people with that substance. And that's exactly what he did. And that's exactly what happened. And so this is a real case of how a virus, how bacteria spread through ostensibly an almost innocent means initially, but become a deadly disease. And that's what happened. And that's how Max Jacobson's drugs spread.
Wow. Still a big problem. Well, we're back on the radio. So welcome back, everyone, over at KGRA. And so, Bill, going back during the break, we were talking a little bit about UFO Hunters. And I wanted to ask you, what was your favorite episode that you did?
I really liked the Dulce episode. Because in the Dulce episode, we uncovered what I think is a massive, I mean, it's beyond UFO. First of all, Gabe Valdez, who was with us in the Dulce episode, it was on the Hickory Apache Reservation. And what we have done to Native Americans is a monumental tragedy. What the government and big pharmaceuticals did was they used that reservation as a testing facility for what they wanted to do. What Gabe Valdez, who was New Mexico State Police, told us was that he never believed there were UFOs behind this thing, that it was not an alien thing. He said it was worse. He discovered a mutilated cow on the road. He was in his patrol car and discovered a mutilated cow on the road on the reservation. And when he examined, and there was a helicopter hovering over the cow, unmarked black helicopter, flipped his lights on, sped up to that helicopter, flew right off. And he sees that the mutilated cow was pregnant. And he called his cousin, who was a veterinarian. The cow was dead. They opened up the womb, the placenta, and what they found was a bovine fetus with a human head. Well, he took a photo of that. And when we were doing the show, he said, "I don't want to show you this. It's awful." We said, "No, you have to show it." So he showed it to us. The network fought us on putting it on the air. We convinced them to put it on the air. I said, we're the UFO Hunters, for God's sakes. Why haven't you put something on the air that makes sense, right? Stupid. Why do a show and then avoid the obvious? They put it on the air. This was in March of 2009.
I think I saw that. I saw
It's on
some
YouTube, yeah.
calf that was really bizarre.
Yeah. In April, United States Senators Grassley, Landrieu, and I believe not McCain, but Graham. They proposed a bill, they put forth a bill in the Senate to modify the federal penal code, Title 18, to make it a crime to interbreed genetically humans and animals. When they did that, the government they came after Disney. Disney owned A&E, A&E owned history, and that was the end of the show. And how do I know that? Because a non-official cover officer for the CIA met us on Long Island and basically said, "You guys are toast." We said, "Toast? What are you, crazy? Our ratings are through the roof. We're beating Jon Stewart and The Daily Show. We're beating all the other shows. We're the highest rated network show on the History Channel." And he said, "Don't argue with me. You're dead." And sure enough, 2 months later, we got the cancellation notice.
Wow.
Because of that. And we were told, you guys just didn't step on a lot of toes. You pounced on the biggest toes there are.
But it wasn't even, it was the decision of the producer of the show to actually go forward?
No, of the network.
The network.
Not the producer, the network. And the funny thing was that season, this is the third season, that season, I proposed to the network brass a show called Ancient Aliens. And so what the network did was they wouldn't give the show to us. They gave the show to another company and said, which is fine. I mean, it's their decision. But they said, "Okay, you can be in the show." And so that's why I'm still on Ancient Aliens for the past 10 years.
Oh, wow. Wow. Isn't that something? So I do remember that picture. I thought it was I thought it was actually on video that it showed that calf. It wasn't video, it was just a photograph?
It was a photograph. I mean, the photograph was videoed, so you saw it on video, but it was a photograph.
Yeah, yeah. Any other cases that you looked at that where you made like a discovery that was unknown until you actually did the research on it?
Well, there was the UFO. This was in Needles, California. And there was a whole UFO flap over Needles. And so we went, and that was in season 2. And what we discovered, so the story was this, that folks who lived along the Colorado River runs outside of Needles, California. And the folks who live along the Colorado River saw this massive blue object crash on the banks of the river. And then this one person, Riverboat Bob, who lived on his boat in the river, Riverboat Bob, saw a Sky Crane helicopter surrounded by other helicopters lifting the object up and carrying it away. And the local radio station began talking about it. Well, within a matter of a day, a contingent of black camouflage wearing troops, because they were heavily armed, in armored vehicles, well, actually armored pickup trucks with 50 cals mounted on them, moved into town and began questioning the people who saw it very, very harshly, right? Shades of Roswell, right? Very harshly. You talk about this, you're going to wind up in jail, you're going to wind up in the desert, that kind of stuff. So George Knapp, Coast to Coast George Knapp, and but also from Channel 8 in Las Vegas, he went out there and wanted to interview these people. And so he sees them, and they say to him, "Who are you?" And Knapp says, "Who am I? Who are you?" And they say, eventually they get into a conversation, and they say, "We're from the Department of Energy." These were the troops who round up loose nukes. That's what they said, loose nukes.
Holy.
And
wow.
So, for some reason, the Department of Energy sent heavily armed troops into Needles, California, to intimidate the witnesses about this object. Okay, so then we heard, after the show, in the next season, we heard that the folks in Needles were being harassed by black helicopters flying over. So we went back to Needles, California in season 3, and we basically stood on the same hill where they were seeing the helicopters and said, "Come on, boys, let's go. We're the helicopters." And we knew that they wouldn't show up because we were there.
Amazing. So what do you think the object would have been to make, a group like that show up?
We believed that it was a nuclear object. It was glowing radium blue. So we believed it was a nuclear object.
Huh.
And we believed it was one of ours, not a UFO. It was one of our weapons that was fired from probably Area 51 over the Mojave Desert, missed its mark, and landed in on the banks of the Colorado River. And so that was a secret weapons test.
Wow. But actually threatening. I mean, that's just so bizarre.
That's right.
They get to that point.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And it was, we thought it was pretty horrifying.
Amazing. Wow. Okay, well, we are at the break, so we are going, this is a hard break we're going to go into, and we will be right back right after these messages. Welcome back to the show. This is Martin Willis, and my guest this evening is Bill Birnes. Bill, so during the break, you and I were talking about ideas on what to talk about. And you mentioned Area 51. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, the same person who said to us, the CIA non-official cover officer, who said to us that he told us this fabulous Area 51 story, and something like this. Area 51, when you go there and you see the signs, it says use of deadly force authorized, which means that theoretically, you should be shot dead if you cross that border. Now, the whole border of Area 51, it's not fenced off. It's an electronic fence.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, I mean, it's stupid to spend a gazillion dollars for a stupid wall when you'd have an electronic wall that if you cross that electronic wall, immediately it triggers a sensor. But this is not political. What all along the border are microphones and motion sensors. As you approach screens in the surveillance, among the surveillance guards, screens light up and they can hear your conversation. One time, this CIA guy said, who was in Delta Force, by the way, so that it's not as though he was an analyst. This was a Delta Force federal law enforcement officer who served on Delta Force. He was in the Army. He said that in addition to all the other personnel there, it's guarded by Delta Force specialists.
It's 7 o'clock.
These two school teachers showed up at Area 50 years ago. They showed up at Area 51. And they stepped over the boundary to say, oh, we were on Area 51. And the Delta Force guys were listening to them. They heard their entire conversation. Then they walked away. Their superior officers said to them, why didn't you shoot them? And the Delta Force guys said this to their superior officers, we joined the Army and requested Army Ranger and Delta Force to protect the United States of America. We didn't join the Army to shoot school teachers. And the superior officer said, you're fired. You're going to go back to the Middle East. And they said, we'd rather be in the Middle East than have to defend an air base against school teachers, young people, and old people who just want to see what the big secret is.
Wow. Well, I know they removed the signs that said deadly force. I forget exactly what they said prior to that. But
it said, the sign said, use of deadly force authorized. I mean, I was there. I stood by in fact, it's a picture of me standing by the sign somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, according to Alejandro, I mentioned that as well when we first talked about this a few weeks ago. And he claims that those signs are no longer there. I don't know.
Right. What happened was, if you trespass on that federal property, you are detained harshly or less harshly, depending upon who you are. You're detained, and they call the sheriff.
Yeah.
And it's a criminal offense, but it's punished with a fine, and it's a misdemeanor, and they haul you away. So they don't shoot you dead.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you something. If you wanted to do an event celebrating UFOs, you might want to get involved in this. I mean, obviously this is not something I would do, but Alejandro, you, anybody else, why don't you do this? Have a rock festival in Rachel, a UFO-themed rock festival in Rachel, Nevada. Call it UFO Stock. You could get bands. You could get sponsorship.
I think this is actually what's going to be happening. It seems to be turning into something like that.
That's exactly what I would do. You have in between the bands, speakers. Mm-hmm. I mean, Peter Merlin is the Area 51 expert. He's been all over TV. He was on my show, and he was on a bunch of other shows. We were on a bunch of other shows together. He'd be great on that show. Get people talking about UFO. I mean, the stories of what goes on there. You could get T.D. Barnes. I think he's still alive. T.D. Barnes, who was an engineer who worked there. He worked on the A-15, on the first of the spy planes that we reverse engineered from the Soviet planes. A lot of people you could get.
Wow.
I would get Annie Jacobs in there, who wrote the book on Area 51.
Now, someone just mentioned Bob Lazar in the chat room, and
Bob Lazar would be great. I don't know if Bob Lazar is doing that, but that's great. Funny thing about Bob Lazar. So there's a group of people who say that all the credentials that Bob Lazar presented were faked.
Mm-hmm.
George Knapp said no, he researched it and found Bob Lazar's name in an old phone directory of Area 51 personnel.
I thought that was Los Alamos.
I think it was right, but it was he said he worked at Los Alamos, and that's how he was beamed up to Area 51, and that's where George Knapp found his name, so that he was in that circle. The crazy thing, call it a coincidence, call it not a coincidence. When you see that Tic Tac UFO video that was filmed by the F-18 fighter pilots back, 15 years ago?
Yeah.
When the UFO starts to move, whatever that object, the Tic Tac, when it starts to move, it turns its bottom as if it's propelling itself over the water. What Bob Lazar described about the objects he saw over Area 51 was that they did the same thing. The Navy has since revealed that it was testing saucer-shaped craft that generated an electromagnetic force field that propelled it.
That's all on paper, from what I understand.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was a paper, and the thing was, they did the same thing. They turned the bottom of that craft to propel them in the opposite direction. And I said to myself, how would Bob Lazar have known about that unless he saw it?
Yeah.
So that, to me, adds veracity to Bob Lazar's story.
Well, as my listeners know, I have mentioned many times that I'm on the fence about Bob Lazar. I always seem to get mail when I talk about it. So I don't really,
you let people rage about it, or either way. But it's still a fascinating story. And if you speak to John Lear, he said he was there. If you so that's on the one hand. And
I mean, when the 9 o'clock or whatever it was, when
he was there.
Object came over.
And Gene Hoff was there, and Bob Lazar's ex-wife was there, and there's videotape.
Yeah, I know.
I saw the videotape.
I remember he said he tripped on the tripod himself right in the middle of filming it.
I saw the videotape.
Yeah, right. We're going to be taking calls in about 15, 20 minutes from now, but I wanted to also, I looked over the chat room and someone asked me what your thoughts were on Roswell. I know you wrote a book on that, right?
Yeah, Day After Roswell.
Day After Roswell. And what was the basis of that particular book?
The basis was, this is another story that gets involved. I'll try to shorten it, but it was this. I was hired by a motion picture production company in Los Angeles to work with them as an editor, editing different manuscripts to produce a book about the troops that we left behind after various wars. Just a real quick, do you see the movie Patton?
A long
George
time ago.
C. Scott's Patton.
Yeah.
Long time ago, right. George C. Scott's Patton. Okay. There is a scene in the movie when George C. Scott, when General Patton is talking to Beadle Smith, General Beadle Smith, and he says, he was played by Edward Binns, and he says to him, let me push through to the eastern sector of Berlin. The war was now over. Let me push through to the eastern sector of Berlin. I'll start a war with those goddamn Ruskies. I'll start the war you want. Kick the Ruskies out of Germany. And Beadle Smith says, no, you can't do it. And Patton was furious. But the movie never said why Patton wanted to do it. Why would you want to start another war? Here's the backstory, the true story. When the Soviet Army occupied East Berlin, there were a number of units from Patton's Third Army still there. The Soviets captured them and sent them back to the Soviet Union, where their identities were stolen, and Soviet spies were reprogrammed to come back into the United States as spies.
Wow.
After the Korean War, this comes from Philip Corso. After the Korean War, there were troops, pilots, American Saberjet pilots, who never came home. The people who came home were Soviet agents programmed to be saboteurs, agents provocateurs, that in the event of a war between the United States and the Soviet Union, they would blow up power plants, train crossings. They were basically a Soviet underground in the United States. That's what Corso said. And he was testifying in in Robert Dornan's POW subcommittee. So there were a number of books that this production company was looking at, and then all of a sudden Corso pops up on the radar talking about the men we left behind. So this production company said to me, interview this guy Corso and let's build a book around him. So we set up a big interview with Phil Corso, and he starts talking, and he says, yeah, I did this stuff after I was in Army R&D. Oh, he said, oh, Army R&D, wow. And we started to think, oh, that's what a little jerkwater command, Army R&D. What do we had? That was your retirement. That was your retirement year, right? And he goes, well, actually, it was I retired after that to go to the Senate Judiciary Committee, where I investigated the Warren Commission. The what?
Wow.
The Warren Commission. And we said, well, how did they pick you for that? He says, well, after in Army R&D, I knew these senators because we were handling the Roswell file. The what file? The Roswell file. All the debris we recovered from that crashed UFO at Roswell, I helped get that back into, well, that was the book.
Wow.
I mean, suddenly, you could hear a pin drop as Corso told that story of what he did with the Roswell files. The file cabinet in the bottom of the Pentagon that they brought up to his office, and his job was to take the technology that we'd recovered, and the technology was really junk. Broken parts of this, broken parts of that, but he was able to take that, he said, with a massive budget from the Senate Armed Services Committee. This was during the Kennedy presidency. He was able to take that to various firms, IBM, Monsanto, Bell Labs, and the Army Laser Laboratory at Columbia, and reverse engineer these projects. And that created basically the golden age of technology in the 1960s. I mean, that was the development of the integrated circuit, the first tabletop computers, things like that. And so that was the basis of the Roswell book.
Wow. And what about, I've heard someone say something about fiber optics. Was that supposed to be part of that as well?
One of the objects that they found two strange objects that they didn't understand. One was this glass cable, glass-looking, but a flex cable, that when they flashed a light through the cable, it broke out into different colors on a wall. And they said, oh, wow. And that went to Bell Labs, and that became the basis for fiber optics.
Yeah. Wow. So you're pretty convinced yourself that these stories have, they are legitimate.
Yes, because one of the pieces of evidence that Phil gave me was his boss's autobiography. It was an autobiography that was published by the Army War College, and they published it. It was the autobiography of an engineer. In the autobiography, General Arthur Trudeau, who was the head of Army R&D, who was a former intelligence officer, he ran G2 for the Army. In that autobiography, he describes the discovery of foreign technology that he brought to the Senate Armed Services Committee to ask them for a budget. And Strom Thurmond, who was then the head of that committee, said, you know what? We will give you a budget to develop this technology, but you can never say it didn't come from the United States. You have to bring the technology to the firms that are already working on it, and the nickname they gave to it, to these pieces of technology, they called them NIHs. NIHs meant not invented here. And Trudeau tells the entire story that Corso told. Anybody should get that book, by the way, from the Army War College.
Interesting. Wow. A lot of people wonder how we have grown so fast in technology in these, so many years. It does want to make you shake your head, and just when you look at how fast technology is growing currently and has grown.
Well, Corso told the story. Corso told the story that in 1947, Harry Truman, when he learned of the crash at Roswell. Now, folks, if you look for Harry Truman and UFOs on the internet, what you will find is the President Truman on YouTube. Well, he wasn't on YouTube, he was on television, saying, these are flying saucers and we know what they are. So the first disclosure of UFOs, besides the Roswell disclosure in 47 in the newspapers, was Harry Truman in 1950 saying, yeah, these are flying saucers. The President of the United States said that. So don't tell me there was no disclosure. There was disclosure.
And Bill, it's been a long time since you and I have actually talked. Well, not really that long, but a lot has happened, I should say.
A year, basically.
Yeah, but so much has happened, since that article came out, and in 2017, and just the overall thought of the whole subject is being taken much more seriously. And what are your thoughts on, say, To the Stars and all the people involved in that, and where they're trying to go?
I don't think there's a cover-up here, but I do think they're raising money. So that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, what I think the backstory is that we've developed exotic flight technologies using forms of physics that we're just not revealing to the world. Why? Because where did we get them from? See, I think what's happening is that what Corso said all the way back in the 1990s actually happened then and is happening now. We're reverse engineering, and I have heard from I know some of the people who worked on this. And so my theory is, and it's a theory, that there is a much deeper, much darker, much more horrible explanation behind all this. Not that we're a slave race or we're being dominated by robots or something. I mean, that's going to happen, but not this century. But I believe that there is an aspect of human history and development. It's the ancient alien theory, that we were brought here, probably as viruses, when the Earth was terraformed by this species, which, by the way, the species is probably us, and because they made us in their own image, and that's one of the big secrets. That because when I did the book on Mickey Rooney back 8 years ago, Mickey Rooney's 8th wife was her father. Her father worked for Ben Rich at Skunkworks, and her father was at Roswell. And her father said to his children, the UFO files exist. The government has files on UFOs. If they release these files, governments and religions would fall. That's what he said. And, after I got off the floor laughing, his daughter, Mickey Rooney's 8th wife, said, you know what's funny? When we were kids, and she's in her 80s, when we were kids, we were sitting at a restaurant in California, and Ben Rich walked over to my father's table. I didn't know who he was. My father introduced him, and he stood up and shook my father's hand and said to the children, said to us, this man knows more secrets he can never tell, and walked away. Yeah, I believe it.
Wow. Hey, one of the things I've given this a lot of thought about, the ancient times and, the possibility that perhaps we were seated here. But then the question always comes up in my mind, if that's the case, then why wouldn't we have hung on to the technology that got us here? Why would we be starting all over again?
Great question.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on that?
Here's why. We weren't seeded as human beings. We were seeded as viruses. What are your thoughts about this? Remember the asteroid that was shooting through our solar system called Oumuamua?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think that was? What's your theory?
I didn't really get into thinking up a theory for that in particular. I know that it had so many bizarre characteristics, its speed, trajectory, and the object shaped itself. Those
right.
were
Here's
really,
the object.
And it was.
You can see it on camera, right? Here's the object.
Mm-hmm.
It's rotating this way, right? It's spinning this way, but it's also doing this.
Yeah, really bizarre.
And it's also doing this, all at the same time. What does that remind you of?
A baton.
Seriously. What?
I don't know.
Mind you, you've seen it every day. What does it remind you of? You're driving through the suburbs on a hot summer day. What do you see?
No, I can't. I'm probably going to...
Sitting on a lawn, what do you see?
Sitting on a lawn. Okay.
Something rotating like this, spinning like this. What do you see?
I don't know. You got me, Bill.
A lawn sprinkler.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
What's it sprinkling?
Oh, like seeding?
What's the one thing that can live in space by going dormant?
Oh, like bacteria or something, right?
Yes. Viruses. It's terraforming. Imagine you are an alien race. Us. Million years in the past. And you are seeding, it's what we're going to be doing. You're terraforming planets. What do you terraform them with? Viruses. When they find a hospitable home, they flourish, they grow, life starts. Single cells that undergo mitosis and split into organisms that multiply with themselves based on carbon or silicon and become life forms. In other words, what if our conception of reality, our perception of the world is fed by viruses? We are virus colonies, bacteria colonies, colonies of germs. Not that they're thinking about, things like the relativity theory, but it's that collective. Now, what if that's the case? And what if 250,000 years ago, human beings were at the point of extinction? There were less than 100 breeding pairs of human beings on the planet. 100 breeding pairs. How do you survive? But yet, a number of really strange things happened. One, the development of tools. Two, the management of fire. Three, the development of language. When you have tools, when you have tools enable you to hunt for food and gather food, when you have fire, that means that you don't have to be tearing at live flesh with your teeth. You cook it and it becomes soft. What happens? Now you can chew it. Human beings, analyze a human being's dentation with the dentation of a dog or a cat or any animal that's a carnivore. And what do you see? A whole different type of dentation. Human beings don't have long fang-like canine teeth. We don't have sharp teeth. Feel your teeth. You're not sharp. They're made for grinding, not tearing. What do you grind? Vegetables. Human beings are biological herbivores, not carnivores. But the result was that with language, with fire, that enabled civilization, that enabled human beings to find shelter from their own predators. I mean, we're not the highest folks on the food chain, let's face it. You know, ask the great white sharks off Cape Cod. So that enabled human beings to form the one thing that enabled us to flourish. The one single thing: civilization. Right? I mean, who said that? Hillary Clinton. We're stronger together. That's the point. That's how human beings survived. My theory is that interventions have taken place over the course of human development, so that our race, we, from 1 million years ago, were terraformed on this planet, and that's how that civilization spread. It's called Panspermia.
Right. I've often wondered, I know this is way off the UFO topic, but it's interesting. I've often wondered how human civilization has made it through ice ages. I mean, you're talking about 450,000 years ago. There's several ice ages in that time.
That's right. We huddled in caves, and the ice ages shrunk us to basically 100 breeding pairs. So we almost went extinct during the ice ages. And we are now looking at, seriously, the sixth extinction of life on planet Earth. My grandchildren will see the end of this century. We'll see the destruction of coastal cities. We'll see, unless we reforest the planet, we'll see this huge amount of carbon dioxide. I mean, the planet will burn unless we find a way, not just to stop it, but I think we're at the stage now of triage. What can we do for our coastal cities? How do you protect? Hurricane Sandy. What happened in Hurricane Sandy? Do you know that Lower Manhattan completely flooded? The subways were knocked out. Florida routinely floods now.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Somebody drops a glass of water, water comes pouring through the a drainage system onto the streets of Miami. That's what's going on. We're seeing it now. We don't have any means of triage because we're still denying it.
That's right. You can't fix something if you deny it.
Right. If it's not there, it's like what Muhammad Ali said. I float like a butterfly and sting like a bee because the hands can't hit what the eyes can't see.
Yeah.
It's what's happening with climate change. If you don't believe it, you can't see it, you're not going to treat it.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder how bad it has to get. And this kind of actually segues into a lot of times you have heard about, a message that we've had over the years, the Ariel school incident for one, where the kids felt as though they received a message that we have to take care of the planet. That was back in the 1990s. That's repeated repeatedly.
Yeah, the whole Zimbabwe incident, sure.
Yeah. And by the way, I was speaking with Randy Nickerson. That film is all ready to go. He's just looking for some way to present it. He's working on that right now, but that film is completely wrapped and ready to go. So the Ariel phenomenon, that's called, and that should be out by the end of this year, hopefully. But
that'll really jazz up the field a little bit.
Right. And James Fox movie, same deal. Both of those are going to be out. So do you think that, there's really validity? I mean, do you think those messages were, actually, like you think you were at the point of it's probably too late? And do you think those messages that people were talking about all these years were really like do or die type of messages?
Well, yeah, because look, we didn't get here overnight. Okay, the if you look at what happened, we've had ice ages before, and we've had hot ages before. We know that, and Earth has survived. Human beings almost went extinct. Dinosaurs went extinct. So we've been through extinctions as the result of climate change. Obviously, the pounding of meteors, major volcanoes, all that's true, but also climate change. The difference from the 1700s is that human civilization created a new element that began to destroy the Earth's atmosphere by overloading it with carbon. Human civilization, the things, one is industrialization. The age of industry actually began in the 17th century, in the late 1600s, so that by the 18th century, we were in the throes of steam. We were developing steam engines. We were developing machines that would belching coal out into the atmosphere. So that was one, the age of industrialization. Two is the age of urbanization. We've had cities before, Rome, Athens, Sparta, but never cities as hubs, as overpopulated hubs, spewing waste materials into the air. So industrialization and urbanization. And of course, overpopulation. We are approaching 8 billion people on the surface of this planet. Earth cannot support 10 million people. So naturally, human beings the reproduction of human beings is slowing down. It's almost like fish in a fish tank, right? If the fish tank is too crowded, fish don't grow, fish die off sooner, and fish don't reproduce. Well, life is life, right? Parts is parts. So human beings are much the same way. So that is what we're seeing. So we're seeing this reversal now of population because the planet cannot support this number of people. So urbanization, overpopulation, industrialization. The three factors that didn't exist in all the prior ice ages and global warmings now exist. So it's not as though we caused this, right? Because that's the big argument from all the industrial folks. Oh, human beings don't cause climate change. We don't cause it. There are natural cycles. For example, the Earth wobbles on its axis. Normally, the North Pole shifts centimeters every year. That's changed now. It's shifting meters. That means the angle of the sun hitting the Earth is a little different. That's going to change the progress of the seasons. It's not just Earth that's undergoing climate change. Our solar system is crossing the plane of the galaxy. That's going to have some effect. So what you're seeing is, again, a natural cycle, but exacerbated to an almost lethal level by human civilization, industrialization, overpopulation.
Wow. And we're sort of in a extinction event right now. I mean, I think the level of extinction is extremely high. It's something like a few dozen species a day or something like that.
That's right.
Yeah.
A few dozen species a day. And then what happens is the collapse of one species along the food chain affects other species.
Sure. Yeah.
So if plankton and krill are dying, that affects seafood life.
That's really serious. Yeah.
Overfishing depletes the fish. I mean, when you realize it, it's almost like we're committing environmental suicide. So that's one. Because chemical wastes are flowing into the waters, garbage is flowing into the waters, plastic is... I'm one of the environmental commissioners for my township. And we're going to ban plastic bags. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
My daughter was in a paddleboard race on the East River. And what did the paddleboarders have to avoid? Plastic.
I know. I heard there's something like 100 billion plastic straws.
Exactly. Hey, Bill de Blasio, you're running for mayor. Clean the goddamn East River up.
We have a caller. We have a caller on the line, Bill. So, caller, what's your first name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Steven, calling from Oregon.
Oh, hey, Steven. We have another one trying to call in. We'll take your call right now instead. So, you have a question for our guest tonight?
Yeah, Bill said we didn't cause climate change, but 97% of climatologists have tied it directly to the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I just said. You're absolutely
So what do you mean when you say things like we didn't cause it? What the hell does that mean?
Here's what it means. That climate change has happened ever since there was a planet Earth. Ever since we had a climate, we've gone through ice ages and we've gone through warming periods. The difference now is that maybe human beings didn't cause it, but what human beings did was we actually triggered it. We triggered a natural cycle and then made it worse. And
wait a minute, didn't we dump the carbon dioxide?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
All the coal plants?
No, that's exactly what I'm saying.
So I guess I don't understand your semantics here. What you're trying to say is we didn't cause it, but we did it.
Right. And here's what I mean. Okay, let's just take one simple form of climate change, which happens absent any human intervention. Okay, during a chilling cycle, a cold cycle, the glaciers in the Arctic and Antarctica grow. Okay, they grow. That changes the air currents. The whole Earth chills. As it chills, cold water drops to the bottom and replaces warmer water. That warmer water then flows in currents. I'm just getting back to what at a primeval planet. Okay, so you're going through warming and cold cycles, but because Earth was heavily forested, the trees, the plants, absorb the carbon dioxide and spew out oxygen. So there's a normal cycle of climate change and the recycle of carbon dioxide.
No. This is different. When the
that's what I'm saying.
When
not listening.
When NASA comes forward and says, "We're doing this,"
we are doing this. You're not listening.
Steve,
what I'm saying is, you take a normal cycle, and then you kick it through changing the face of the planet. And suddenly, what's been a normal cycle for millions, hundreds of millions of years, now becomes an extinction event. Human beings made what was a normal cycle, the flowing of currents in the ocean, the melting and the warming and then refreezing of the Arctic. We took that through our industrialization, overpopulation, and urbanization. We took that and turned it into a killing event from a natural event.
Steve, I don't think Bill he's not a climate change denier in any means. I think that's what you're taking, Steve. I don't believe that's
when he says things like, we didn't cause it, he sounds like George Norrie, where he's just looking for any kind of twisted explanation. The problem with that is this really pacifist take on that. That means we don't have to take any responsibility and do anything different.
You're extrapolating something that doesn't exist. Okay? What you're saying is, because I'm saying we've had climate change on this planet since we had a planet. That doesn't mean
that's obvious. That's Captain Obvious stuff. Everybody knows the weather
changes. That's what I'm saying. It is Captain Obvious. We've had climate change, normal climate change, heating and freezing, for hundreds of millions of years. But what I'm saying now, that ever since the 18th century, what we have done to the surface of the planet has taken a natural cause of events, warming and cooling, and turned it into a lethal extinction event of the whole planet.
Exactly.
So
yes, I just take exception to the phrase, "we didn't cause this."
You're looking at semantics instead of looking at the science.
Well, actually, when you say something like, "we didn't cause this," that's pretty declarative.
Yeah, we didn't create climate change. What we did was we took a natural cycle of events, and through our presence on the planet, population, industrialization, and urbanization, we turned what
Okay.
All right.
You understand what I'm saying? We created a lethal extinction event.
I also understand the danger of saying we're not responsible. We didn't cause this.
Don't focus on the words. Focus on the science.
You said, yeah, I get that. Don't focus on the words that you said.
All right. Well, that's. I think he made it pretty clear. But thanks for the call. And I have another caller on the line. Caller, what's your name and where are you calling from?
My name's Kim.
Hi.
Calling from Alberta, Canada.
All right, welcome to the show. You have a question for our guest?
Just no comment to Bill. We really miss you out west here, Bill. I know you're going to get your passport one of these days.
My passport? I do have a passport.
I hope so. Hey, we don't have climate change out west.
You don't? You just have it burning up, right?
All we get is cold. I don't know what climate change is even. I wish we had it because, man, it would sure be nice if it got warm here again.
Where do you live?
Alberta.
Well, we live in
Alberta.
And,
I know.
I mean, this summer...
I just spoke to somebody who said he spent his part of his late July and August vacation up in the northern peninsula of Michigan. And I said, wow. And he said, yeah, I froze my butt off.
Well, you guys get some cold weather. I mean, us Canadians sometimes sound like we're tough, but then I look at the temperatures down in some parts of the USA, especially Colorado early in the year, and I mean, it's like snowing, and we're still 20 degrees, and it's getting really cold there. But, you know, climate change, I mean, I heard you kind of getting a tough time there, Bill.
No, all I was saying was this, that you've got climate deniers and you've got climate change scientists. So deniers and scientists, but they're talking past each other. See, that is part of what I believe. This is something that Bill Clinton said years ago, too, that the worst arguments happen when people talk past each other. So to say that somehow human beings, that there was never climate change on the planet until there were human beings is false, because the climate did change on the planet. But
absolutely agree.
To say that for the climate to change as an extinction event, that's us. That's all on humanity. The terrible effects were not felt on this planet, because after all, if there are no human beings on the planet and the dinosaurs all drop dead in a certain thing, fine, who's going to say that it was climate change? What, the Brontosaurus is saying, hey, you knocked off the coal? No, it's happened for millions of years. The difference is we're here. That's the difference.
Unfortunately, yes, maybe. For some animals, we are here.
Hang on just 1 second. We have another caller that just called in. Please mute your... anyone that calls in needs to mute their media device, please. So did you have any question, or you just wanted to make that statement?
I just want to make a statement and just say thank you, Martin. I know you've been on holidays. I know I send you a couple emails here and there.
Yeah, not really holidays.
I really appreciate us guys out here, your efforts on doing these interviews. I know sometimes they're very difficult, and I can only imagine because you're a busy guy. And Bill, I mean, we just love you. I mean, I told you, come on out west. You can stay at my house.
Hey,
thanks, Bill. Thanks, Martin. Everybody in the chat room. Someday I'll come back. Bye-bye.
I would love to go back to Canada. Back when I was still a graduate student, we would go to conferences up in Canada. And the striking thing was, it'd be like, a very pleasant 60 degrees in New Jersey. And then all of a sudden you're in Canada. It's like, God, how do these people live in the snow?
All right. Well, take care.
We'll go skiing. Thanks, guys. Keep it up. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.
All right. We have another caller on the line. Caller, your first name, where are you calling from?
My name is Russell, and I'm calling you from Springfield, Oregon.
Hey, Russell, welcome to the show. You have a question for our guest?
Yeah. First off, I wanted to say, Bill, I've followed you for many years, and your UFO Hunters show was awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
And yes, I wish you guys that would have continued it. And let's see. Also, I just caught your live show here, and I was wondering what your take on it is on the To the Stars Academy, and especially like the recent split in the stock offer, and just your overall take on what's going on with the outcomes since
the stock split speaks for itself. I mean, I have to say, it's one thing to have a legitimate scientific endeavor under an academic auspice. I get it. I mean, maybe I'm prejudiced in the regard that really I think that I really like to have peer-reviewed studies. I believe that people who've spent the bulk of their lives studying that particular discipline should be the ones to review material. But to do it as like a corporation that's selling stock, that's investing in this, that really bothers me. I have to say, I just see an underside to that I don't like. It's not as though To the Stars Academy is the first group ever to do this. I mean, Robert Bigelow had his own NIDS organization to study the phenomena. I get that. That was self-funded. I get where the government has been researching this for years. That's pretty clear. I get, and one of the things that happened early in the realization that we were not alone is that a lot of the research into the technology that we recovered, a lot of that research was done by private groups, by NGOs, non-government organizations, because NGOs are not responsive to freedom. They don't have to comply with freedom of the press requests. Okay.
So would it be safe to
That's
say
the
you
question.
think that Steve Justice? Do you think that Steve Justice has the goods on this?
Do I think? Yeah, I think so, possibly. But I mean, you don't have to comply with requests. You can keep things secret. You can do your research in private. And in fact, some folks, who shall go nameless, have said, gee, what a shame it is. Every single UFO we've recovered doesn't have propulsion using dark energy. And I said, whoa. That means that there were groups actively studying UFOs, possibly funded in part by the government, and that the government has been studying this phenomena for a long time. But when governments study things, they study them for a purpose. And the purpose is, if these guys have technology that we need, let's study that technology. Let's develop that technology. And that's what I think is going on.
Interesting.
Right.
Well,
that's what I figured. I just thought that they've already got it figured out and just trying to figure out a way.
I do not think so.
White world.
I do not think so. One of the fascinating things about Ronald Reagan is that President Reagan had two separate UFO sightings, and they were heavy, heavy sightings. One was when he was still in show business. He was still, I think he was hosting Death Valley Days at the time. I'm not sure what show he was doing, but he was hosting Death Valley Days, I think. So it would have been in the 50s. And he was riding down Pacific Coast Highway.
Him and Nancy.
Right. He was with Nancy Reagan. And they saw a UFO over the highway that went out over the highway and went out into Santa Monica Bay and went into the ocean. And Reagan was like, and he claimed, and he has said that he felt that he received a message from that craft to get out of acting and get into politics. Shortly thereafter, he ran for governor of California. As governor of California, he was in his plane, his governor's plane, right, his official plane, flying from LA, from Los Angeles, back to Sacramento. As they were flying over the over Fresno, he sees a flying saucer out the plane's window. He says to his pilot, "Do you see that?" The pilot says, "Yes, Governor, I see that." He says, "Well, follow that UFO." So the plane turns over the Mojave Desert to follow the UFO. The UFO realizes it's being followed, shoots up into the sky. Reagan is so excited that when he lands in Sacramento, he says to the first person he sees, I think his name was Walter Miller. He was the Sacramento bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal. He says, "I just saw a UFO. I'm so excited. I'm going to tell Nancy." True story. It shows up in the Wall Street Journal. When Ronald Reagan is talking about, now there were two things going on in the 80s when Reagan was president. One, the Soviet Union developed its satellite launching capability to be able to put up satellites in a week, which meant they had the edge on us when it came to putting up surveillance satellites. That's one. We needed a way to surveil those surveillance satellites and shoot them down. But Reagan also knew, because he'd seen one, that there were UFOs flying all over the place. So how about this? You create a ring of satellites around the planet. Hughes Aircraft was responsible for doing a lot of that work around the planet that not only look down, but look sideways at the other satellites, but also look out there for UFOs. What a perfect cover. Reagan was probably the first under-the-table UFO president.
Wow. That's interesting. Never thought of anything about that in that
that was
direction.
That was the space defense.
It was sort of Star Wars, as it said, right? Did they call it Star Wars? Hey, thanks for the call. We're getting near the end of the show here. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Again, thanks for the call. So, Bill, we only have a couple of minutes left here, and so we can look forward to your book coming out in about when, would you think?
I would say September. I mean, I'm finishing it up now. I'm doing right now I'm in an article that I'm in a chapter that I think is very exciting. It's the story of the relationship between the actress Hedy Lamarr, Tandaleo, Hedy Lamarr, and Dr. Max Jacobson, Dr. Feelgood, but also how Hedy Lamarr developed spread spectrum technology. That's the technology that powers your iPhone. Remember the old days,
right.
Marty?
Yeah.
Remember the old days of CB radios?
Yeah, oh, yeah, sure do. Breaker 19.
You're riding along the highway, right? Hey, breaker, channel 9.
Yeah.
And somebody then keys his mic or keys her mic.
Yeah.
And what happens?
You cancel out. Yep.
Blots out the entire thing. Hey, you, get off that band. Okay.
Hey,
I
Bill.
remember that. The old CBD days.
Do we have a minute? This person's been trying to call in over and over.
Go ahead,
we only have a minute, so make this real quick if you would. Call your first name.
This is Phil calling from Redondo Beach, California.
Hey, Phil, can you make a quick call? Quick question here.
Yeah. The quick question here is, Bill, I had this conversation with Whitley Strievel a while ago, and I've studied this phenomena for over 35 years, and I've never seen the UFO file so active. And I was just wondering if you could comment on that, and I'll take your answer off the air. Thank you.
It is very, very active. It's extremely active. I think that what's happening is that this stuff is coming to light deliberately, and it's coming to light not because we've discovered UFOs. We've known about UFOs for like thousands of years. It's coming to light. I mean, look at some of the medieval paintings where you see UFOs up in the sky. The Annunciation of Mary, for example. The government is now set to release a lot of the exotic weapons they've developed from that technology. And in order to do so, they have to prepare us. So how do they prepare us? They take videos. That's what's going on.
Interesting. Bill, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure as always. It's always a lot of fun talking to you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. You take care of yourself.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. All right.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. So that's it for the show tonight. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week with Joe Murgia, and known as UFO Joe. And thanks so much for listening. And also thank you for everyone that helps out with the show, and Alejandro Rojas, and our guest, and you, the listener. Remember to keep your eyes to the sky.
And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."